Dear Lord Amanaman, I come to you with a heart that feels both heavy and hopeful. You see the parts of me that are broken, the parts that are tired, and the parts that are scared. There is a lump in my throat, a physical thing the doctors will soon remove. But you know, it is more than just that. It is years of unspoken words. It is lifetimes of swallowed tears. I place my fear into your hands, the same hands that I trust have guided me to this very moment of surrender. Please guide the hands of my surgeon, Dr. Donato. Let him be an instrument of your healing. Let this surgery be more than just a medical procedure. Let it be a cleansing, a release of all that has caused me pain, both seen and unseen. I am ready to let go. I am ready to be made new. Amen. This prayer became my constant companion in the days leading up to my surgery. The diagnosis of papillary thyroid carcinoma felt like a final, physical manifestation of a long, emotional sickness. For years, my heart had felt crowded, entangled in relationships that demanded pieces of me without offering wholeness in return. I was living a kind of emotional polygamy, giving my energy and affection to situations that would never be fully mine. This lump in my throat felt like the physical headquarters for all that heartbreak. It was the warden of my sadness, a constant reminder of my inability to speak my own truth. The decision to have the thyroidectomy was terrifying, but it also felt like the most profound act of self-love I had ever committed to. It was a declaration that I was finally choosing myself. Preparing for the surgery at Capital Medical Center was a surreal experience. The world continued its busy pace outside, but inside I was slowing down, turning inward. The pre-operative tests, the endless forms, the conversations about risks, they all felt like rituals preparing me for a great passage. I met with Dr. Donato, a man whose calm demeanor immediately put me at ease. He spoke of the procedure with a quiet confidence that felt like a lifeline. He explained how he would make a careful incision, how he would gently remove the gland that had turned against me. I listened, I nodded, and I trusted. I was putting my life, my voice, and my future into his hands and into God's. It was a profound act of letting go of control, something I had desperately clung to in my chaotic relationships. On the morning of the surgery, a strange peace washed over me. The fear was still there. A quiet hum beneath the surface, but it was no longer in charge. My family was with me, their faces a mixture of concern and love. As I was wheeled into the operating room, I looked up at the bright, sterile lights and thought, this is it. This is where I leave the old me behind. The anesthesiologist spoke to me in a soothing voice, and I felt a cool liquid enter my veins. I closed my eyes and offered one last silent prayer. Not a prayer of pleading anymore, but one of gratitude. I was grateful for the chance to heal. I was grateful for the end of one story and the brave, uncertain beginning of another. I was ready to surrender. The operating room was a world of its own, buzzing with a focused, quiet energy. I remember the kindness in the eyes of the nurses above their masks. They were my final connection to the waking world before I went under. Dr. Donato gave me a reassuring nod, a silent promise to take good care of me. Then came the moment of intubation. He had explained it to me before. A tube would be placed down my throat to help me breathe while I was asleep. It sounded frightening, a violation of the very area that was causing all the trouble. Yet in that moment, it felt like another necessary surrender. I had to allow this temporary discomfort for the sake of a permanent healing. It was a powerful lesson. Sometimes, the path to freedom requires us to go through things that feel constricting. We must allow ourselves to be vulnerable to be truly helped. Lying on that operating table, I felt a profound sense of detachment from my own body. It was no longer just mine. It was a vessel entrusted to a team of skilled healers. The surgery, a total thyroidectomy, meant they would remove the entire butterfly-shaped gland at the base of my neck. This small organ had become a traitor and it had to go. The process would take hours, a period of time I would never remember. It was a blank space in my life's timeline, a sacred pause where the work of mending was done without my conscious participation. I was completely reliant on the expertise of Dr. Donato and his team, and on the grace of God to see me through. This complete loss of control was, ironically, the most liberating feeling I had experienced in years. I imagined the surgery as a careful excavation. Dr. Donato was not just a surgeon, he was an archaeologist of my pain. With each precise movement, he was not only removing a diseased gland, but also freeing a voice that had been trapped for far too long. He was cutting away the physical manifestation of years of accommodating, of shrinking myself to fit into spaces where I didn't belong. He was removing the lump that grew from unspoken goodbyes and unfulfilled promises. The surgical tools were not just cutting tissue, they were severing ties to a painful past. This procedure was my declaration of independence from the emotional poison that had finally found a way to express itself physically. It was a radical act of purification. Waking up was a slow, foggy ascent from a deep, dreamless sea. The first thing I noticed was a dull ache in my throat, a tender reminder of the battle that had been fought while I was away. The breathing tube was gone, but its memory lingered. I was in the recovery room and a nurse's gentle voice was calling my name, pulling me back to the present. I tried to speak, but only a hoarse whisper came out. My voice was different, fragile, but it was there. I was breathing on my own. I was alive. A wave of overwhelming gratitude washed over me, so powerful it brought tears to my eyes. The heaviest part was gone. I could feel it. The vacancy in my neck was not an emptiness, but a new, clean space waiting to be filled with my own truth. The days that followed the surgery were a lesson in patience and gentleness. My neck bore a neat stitched line, a scar that I would come to see as a badge of honor. Swallowing was difficult at first, each sip of water a deliberate, mindful act. My body was healing, and it demanded that I slow down and listen to its needs in a way I never had before. This forced stillness was a gift. It gave me time to process, not just the physical trauma of the surgery, but the emotional release that came with it. I was no longer just recovering from a thyroidectomy. I was recovering from a lifetime of putting myself last. The pain was a teacher, reminding me to be kind to myself, to nurture the tender parts that were finally getting the chance to mend. My new life began with a tiny pill. Every morning before anything else, I take a dose of levothyroxine. This medication is now my thyroid, the chemical messenger that my body no longer produces on its own. It is a daily, lifelong commitment. This simple ritual has become a sacred practice for me. It is a promise I make to myself each day to show up, to provide what is needed, to maintain balance. It is everything I had failed to do in my past relationships. Taking this pill is an act of devotion to my own well-being. It is a tangible reminder that I am responsible for my own health and happiness, and that this responsibility is not a burden, but a privilege. My survival and my stability are literally in my own hands every morning. The physical recovery was intertwined with a profound emotional recalibration. Without the diseased gland, I felt lighter. It was as if a constant source of static had been removed from my system. My emotions felt clearer, more my own. The fog of anxiety and unexplained sadness that had clouded my life for so long began to lift. I started to recognize how much of my energy had been consumed by managing the symptoms of my thyroid condition, symptoms that mirrored the emotional turmoil I was experiencing. The fatigue, the mood swings, the feeling of being overwhelmed, it was all connected. Removing the thyroid didn't magically solve all my problems, but it cleared the battlefield so I could finally see the real enemy, my own tolerance for what was hurting me. As my voice slowly returned, it felt different. It was quieter, a bit rough around the edges, but it also felt more authentic. The hoarseness was a reminder that I had been through something significant and that I had survived. I no longer felt the urge to fill every silence. I spoke with more intention. I learned to say no without the crushing guilt that used to accompany it. My new voice was not just for speaking to others, it was for speaking to myself, for offering words of comfort and encouragement. This physical change became a powerful symbol of my internal transformation. I was learning to use my voice not to please others, but to honor my own journey and speak my own truth, no matter how quiet it had to be at first. For years I lived in a state of emotional polygamy. My heart was not my own. It was divided, given away in pieces to people and situations that could never offer me a whole and committed love. I was one of many, constantly vying for attention, for validation, for a sense of security that was always just out of reach. This emotional division was exhausting. It created a constant, low-grade stress that my body absorbed day after day. My thyroid gland, the master regulator of my body's energy, was working overtime, trying to manage the fallout from a heart in constant turmoil. Looking back, I see the lump in my throat as a physical manifestation of this toxic arrangement, a piece of me that had grown sick from the strain of being divided. Removing my thyroid felt exactly like ending those toxic relationships for good. It was a final, non-negotiable breakup. It was me standing up and saying, I can no longer live like this. I choose monogamy of the heart. I choose to be devoted to myself. The surgery was the ultimate act of cutting cords. Just as the surgeon cleanly removed the gland from my neck, I was mentally and spiritually removing the people and patterns that were making me sick. The empty space left behind was not a void of loss, but a sacred space of possibility. It was a clean slate, a declaration that from now on, my heart and my energy would be reserved for what and who was truly deserving, starting with myself. This journey has taught me about the profound connection between our emotional and physical health. We cannot compartmentalize our pain. A broken heart can manifest as a sick body. Swallowed words can become a lump in our throat. My heartbreak and my struggle with self-worth were not just abstract concepts. They were active agents in my body, contributing to an environment where disease could flourish. Healing, therefore, had to be holistic. It wasn't enough to just take the levothyroxine pill every morning. I also had to do the hard work of healing my heart, of forgiving myself for tolerating less than I deserved, and of creating new rules for living that prioritized my peace. If you are reading this while facing your own mountain, whether it's a health crisis or a heartbreaking relationship, please know this. You have a strength within you that you have not yet discovered. Your pain is real, but it is not your identity. Surrender is not weakness. It is the ultimate act of faith. Trust in a power greater than yourself, whether you call it God, the universe, or a deep inner wisdom. Guide the hands of your healers, both medical and spiritual, and most importantly, choose yourself. Choose to remove whatever is toxic in your life, be it a gland or a grievance. The scar may remain, but it will be a beautiful map of the journey back to yourself. You are worthy of a life of wholeness, of peace, and of a love that does not ask you to divide your heart.